Have you heard that Sylius 1.0 is end of maintenance? This means that within the end of this year, you will no longer receive any security updates. This leaves you with one of two options. Either wait this year and then be on your own, or either way, plan this year for the upgrade path and be with Sylius 2.0. But what are the major differences between these two platforms on the technical level? Is it hard to migrate? What are the major points that you need to plan ahead to actually be prepared? This is what this video is all about. My name is Łukasz Chruściel, and for the last 11 years I'm developing based on Sylius. Today I would like to help you to plan these things ahead. Therefore, you can expect today major differences between versions of libraries that Sylius is based on. What are the major differences in the UI and API development? What has changed on the Symfony level, and how we can all plan these things ahead. Before we jump into the details, you also need to be aware that not only Sylius 1.14 is end of maintenance, but also version 2.0 is only with the security fixes until February 2025. Therefore, there is no point into migration to that version alone. The best option would be to plan the full path ahead, at least to 2.2. Otherwise, you will again need to plan it in the short period of time. The fundamentals that major Sylius platform stands on is PHP, Node.js, some database engine, and libraries like Symfony and API platform. The good news is that before you will even start upgrading to the new version, most of these libraries are compatible for 2. So you need at least to have the compatibility with the PHP 8.2, Symfony 6.4, Node.js of version of 20, and MySQL, MariaDB or Postgres that you have already. The major differences and the major problems with the upgrade paths lies in the UI and API. The UI is problematic because between version 1 and version 2 of Sylius, the whole stack has changed. Previously, there was jQuery, Semantic UI, and that was the base. Now we have Symfony UX, Vanilla.js, Twig Components, Twig hooks. These things may look similar, but the backbone is totally different. In addition, for API platform or API part, API platform was migrated from version 2.7 to 4.1. This generates not an easy way to upgrade between the version, and there is no bridge provided for now. Therefore, it requires a leap of faith from you to be sure that the platforms works exactly the same, because you cannot allow yourself to make a gradual migration between these two platforms. Firstly, let's take on a workshop the differences between version 1 and version 2 from the front-end storefront perspective. As you can see on the screen, Sylius V1 and V2 looks alike. Even though you see slight differences, that things are slightly spaced from each other, there's slightly different colors, the platform is quite similar. But it's just the peak of the iceberg that you can see. The hero is on the same point, on the same level. Last deals or latest products looks quite similar, but already you can see that the theme of the platform has changed. Therefore, the fixtures are slightly different, but that's just the UI thing to make them a little bit more distinct. But other than that, this platform on the surface looks exactly the same, or almost the same. The major difference is on the level of code. If we will take a look into the source code of the front page of Sylius, you can see that you could always find there plenty of tags, which of course right now are different because version 1 has been using Semantic UI, which anyway is that from 2018. Therefore, migration to Bootstrap 5 was the reasonable choice that increased drastically the amount of talents on the market, plus it's much more familiar the whole bunch of backend developers. Therefore, migration from Semantic and Bootstrap easier development in the long term, even though it right now requires some pain to migrate from one version to another. In addition, what you can see on the screen is that previously we had some concept of Sonata events. later migrated to Sylius events. The good part of these events were that both of them were fully backward compatible. The idea of these events was to allow you to inject part of the template into already existing UI. You can think that that's overcomplication, and many of you would prefer to just stick to Symfony native way of overriding templates just by placing the file. Syhowever, if you will think about it, when you have plenty of plugins, it starts to be really complicated. If you have your major Sylius box at the top as a vendor, there are two plugins that would like to extend the same UI, and your end application at the bottom. So you actually have, to some extent, multi-inheritance from two plugins that extend the same class or the same project at the top. Simple overriding does not work anymore. Therefore, the whole concept of events was introduced in the first place. Now, hooks brings it to another level, and now it should be easier than ever before. What you can see here on the screen is that even though, again, they seems to be quite similar, as you can have similar events like begin block or begin event with the name Sylius.shop.layout.before_content, we can have the similar hook called Sylius_shop.homepage.index. First of all, you already could notice the difference in the name. Secondly, you need to know that from now on, the first part of the name is not separated with dot, but with the underscore. So right now we have Sylius_shop. Previously it was Sylius.shop. Later, another difference is that from now on, from Sylius 2.0, we are using hooks instead of events. Twig hooks is the new library that can be added to any Symfony project, but it will probably be mostly used in the Sylius ecosystem. Secondly, each hookable or previously event had its own names. So at the example of the banner that you can change at the front page of the store, previously we had event name of Sylius.shop.homepage. Right now we have Sylius_shop.homepage.index. Then we have the name of the hookable banner. Previously it was block name banner. And then you can see also slight difference in the template name and the priority. These all things means that whatever you build over the years with Sylius version 1.x is no longer compatible with 2.x. These changes are structural, so you can always try to look for the patterns, how to migrate from one to another, but for sure you need a deep check if everything works correctly, because there will be plenty of nuances that differentiate version 1 from version 2. When we look in the code, you can already see the differences in the structure of classes, usage of headers, also that some additional ARIA labels are added, so the better alignment with WCAG standards, so it can be easier read by screen readers. Plus, of course, classes and structure is slightly different below. As you can see, the whole project is built on the Bootstrap 5, which, as mentioned before, should improve the maintainability over the years of the project. At the end, Bootstrap is one of the standards among all the projects in the internet. Plus, it should increase the talent pool that can actively and quickly adjust your frontend of any store built on a Sylius. And another major difference between version 1 and version 2 is that previously whole platform was written mostly with jQuery, which right now is all gone. From now on, Vanilla.js for simple things or stimulus controllers are the way to go. In addition, this whole package works directly with Symfony UX, which allows you to make front-end developers out of the back-end developers, because right now it's much easier to build live components or components that will actively update themselves just with the knowledge of backend developers. As an example, you can take a look into the card button that you have on the website. Previously it was just a simple tooltip with the price. Right now it's the whole section that updates on the right side, but you can also see how different these two components are from the code level. It is the major difference between these two platforms. Right now you have much more data life props, data structures that are already inputted or included into the tag of the card. Previously it was more hidden, done directly on the JS level. Now let's take a look into what is the difference between changing some part of the event or UI in Sylius version 1 and version 2. Previously, we had a version that or structure that was focusing on Sylius UI events. So in the, of course, folder of config packages, something like Sylius underscore UI.yum, we could have template like this. What this part of code does is that it turns off the banner that was previously there, and we can have our custom hero with the path to the template plus some kind of the priority. In the new platform, it will look quite similar. We need to create, we need to also go to config packages. Now create a new file. This time it would be preferable to call it Sylius underscore Twig hooks.yaml. But this, of course, is just a minor change, and you can omit it entirely, because from the Symfony perspective, how it reads this file, the name of the file doesn't matter that much. The only major change that you will have with different names is the order of loading. Therefore, the last file will read will be the whole content if you have the same key. But that's the minor thing that you don't need to worry at this stage. And we can have similar effect having the code like this. As you can see, the major differences is that the keys are slightly different. The whole name is usually in the singular quotation mark. Later, we can still disable some parts of the UI in the same way, but and we add a new stuff also in similar manner. What the major difference is that we have underscore in the name instead of dots. Plus, there is no block element from the hook level, which is in our case Sylius underscore shop.homepage.index. We go directly to the hookables that are there. So there's no more block element. Instead of events, there are hooks. These are major differences. Twig hooks add additional features like allowance to inject some kind of the context, but that's a new feature that doesn't matter that much from the upgrade perspective, but can be useful for you once you migrate to Sylius 2.0. Finishing the topic of Twig hooks, the major additions that this new layer adds is that Twig hooks can directly inject Twig components or live components from Symfony UX to your page, which also smooths the developer experience. You also have additional panel that may allow you to arrange your head around with some details in the Symfony profiler. But if you still feel lost in the whole Twig hook environment, as some developers feel, there are some community plugins that try to solve that problem with Sylius hook highlighter plugin. So give it a try if that's something that makes your head goes around and you cannot find yourself in this space. Now, another cool library that you should remember about if you plan migration from Sylius 1 to Sylius 2 is Sylius Legacy Shop Bridge plugin. As you could already hear, jQuery in the Sylius 2 is gone, Semantic is gone. All the libraries previously used like Lightbox, Slick Carousel, and events are gone, and that can drastically increase the cost of upgrade. If you look for something that can reduce your cost and still allow to reuse the old storefront that you optimized over the years, you can check legacy shop bridge plugin, which was recently published by Sylius itself, and therefore you can be sure that it works well and will be maintained for time to allow you to migrate within the time. That should reduce the cost because you can now focus on other things that work or needs to work, or the full admin panel, which also was migrated from Semantic UI to Bootstrap on the admin level to Tabler, and therefore you can use it there. As in admin panel, if some things will not work from the day one, you can probably live with that for some short period of time. While on the front end, it always required to have full migration without any regressions. Also, the key point is that using the bridge is not the permanent solution. You need to remember it's just bridge that allows you the gradual migration, like a short-term solution that should reduce your costs for now, so you can have the migration scoped into smaller parts. One of the key features or key parts that we all need to remember when we are doing the migration, that reducing the scope, the surface of the change, will always increase the likelihood of success of that migration. At the end, always something may go wrong, and less things we touch, the probability of things going wrong is less. Now, another major change between Sylius v1 and Sylius v2 is the change of the way how we are handling state machines. Symfony Workflow was already introduced with Sylius 1.x. However, from Sylius 2.0, it became a standard, or rather a default version. Luckily for us, Winzu State Machine is still maintained. It's just not a default version. If you will install Sylius 2.0, 2.1, or 2.2 right now, you will only receive state machine of Symfony Workflow. If you would like to use the legacy system, or you will upgrade to Sylius 2.0 and would like to use the legacy system, you need to additionally install Winzu State Machine. The great part of the Symfony Workflow is that it's together with the Symfony UX, something that brings Sylius again closer to the Sylius Symfony core, Symfony native solutions, to the things that makes Sylius so familiar to all the Symfony developers. The trade-off is that it uses, first of all, event listeners from the Symfony event dispatcher to trigger additional logic. And there's no easy way, according to my knowledge, for now on, to drastically change how the state machine looks like. So there are trade-offs of that. I'm sure that the community will find a solution for these problems eventually, but for now we need to know that the way how state machine worked in Sylius 1.x is deprecated. It's not the default version. However, you can still use them with the bridge. Now, let's see on an example what are the differences between Winzu State Machine and Symfony Workflow in world of Sylius. Previously, with Winzu State Machine, if you would like to have some changes to the state machine behavior, you will create a new file, let's call it state machine, and you will have configuration something like this. We start with the Winzu State Machine component, the name of the graph that we are using, and in the callbacks we were defining the transitions on which it should be called, what kind of service will be fetched. It means that these services will be fetched directly from Symfony dependency injection container and called directly with an object which is a subject of this transition as a first argument. Side note, here you see that in my example I used email sender and warehouse notifier to integrate whatever it is below these functions, but you need to remember that state machine altogether, any transition on the state machine, doesn't matter if it's on Winzu or Symfony, it's happening before closing the transaction to the database. So it's not recommended to do integration with external system without outbox pattern, because there may be a case where you will notify external system, send an email or notify warehouse, while there will be some exception during the flushing to the database, and you will end up in the desynchronized state between your application and the third party. Side note aside, this is how it looks like previously, but in case of the Symfony Workflow, we are not using any YAML configuration. Instead, we would need to create a new class. Let's call it order completed listener. This class will need to have an attribute. Of course, this is the matter of the taste. You still can use services file to make it easier, but as in the whole Symfony ecosystem, we are migrating more to the attributes first, configuration, auto configuration, and etc. And auto wiring. We can use just event listener component from Symfony and create a class with some content like this, which means that with Symfony Workflow, we are using proper dependency injection on the class to trigger the logic that we want. And with the event listener from Symfony event dispatcher component, we can trigger to the proper place or event or on the transition complete once it's complete. As you can see with Symfony Workflow, the major difference is that we no longer configure it through the configuration, but rather we're using it through the class, which is an event listener from a Symfony event dispatcher component. Therefore, we are using proper dependency injection to inject classes that we will use in this case. This small difference has tremendous consequences, because previously with the Sylius 1.x, all the services were public. They were public due to the usage of the Winzu State Machine, because the way how the Winzu State Machine is fetching all the services from the Symfony container is forcing the whole Sylius package to have services public. Now, since the Symfony Workflow is new default, all the services were made private. Therefore, even though you may use Winzu State Machine as a bridge to Sylius 2.0 and you don't need to migrate this configuration, you still may have problems with usage of the Winzu State Machine due to privatization of the services that are internally Sylius. Therefore, some kind of the compiler pass or overriding of these classes will be required to make it work with the new Sylius version. As we're in the topic of comparison between Winzu and Symfony Workflow, it's worth noting that with the Symfony Workflow, a few new features or improvements to developer existence were added. First of all, Symfony Workflow always generates you a graph of the transitions and nodes that are in your state machine. Secondly, usage of the class as event listeners makes it much easier to unit test the class itself if everything is properly executed, which was a challenge back in the days. You had to use the end-to-end test to ensure the correctness. Now, the class itself can be unit tested, but of course, you still need at least one functional or end-to-end test to ensure that it's properly integrated with the full system. The last technical component that we need to talk about in the topic of what makes your migration to Sylius 2.0 tough is API platform. For the long time with the Sylius 1.x, we were integrating with API platform 2. That was the only version that was available back in the day, and when I back in the Sylius made a decision to integrate, it was the only choice. Now, over the years, API platform released version 3.0, which already provided a big architectural difference, and now around the time that Sylius 2.0 was released, they also released API Platform 4. As one way or another, the changes were not backward compatible, there was no point in migration from API Platform 2.7 to already legacy version of API Platform 3. Therefore, current situation is that you need to do migration from API Platform 2.7 to API Platform 4.1. The whole Sylius architecture was meant to decouple the infrastructure influence of API platform. So API platform main logic is focusing over how to read data from the repository, how to serialize them, and how to trigger commands. And the commands are the way how we translate from infrastructure layer to application layer where Sylius lies. Yet there are some major architectural changes between API Platform 2.7 and 3.0 or 4.1, which includes changes from data providers to state providers and from persisters to data processors. This already also will influence how you integrated your code with API Platform. The main logic should stay quite similar. In addition to that, the major problem with migration to API Platform is the changes of the configuration. Let's take a look at example. What are the differences in the configuration? Previously, if we would define some resource in API Platform, it would look more or less like this. We'll have a file, XML file, with the configuration something like this. We will have a resource class which will contain collection operations and item operation with some kind of the definition inside. From now on, in the Sylius 2.0 and therefore API Platform 4.1, you would have a similar class, but with totally different configuration. Even though the beginning it looks almost the same, the structure here is totally different. There are new concepts like URI attributes or URI links, and most important is that we do not have collection operations and item operations, but rather we have a collection of operations which can be either a collection or item. And from now on, it's much easier to define custom operation, to use different HTTP methods for your custom logic, which is a great benefit. But this structure and the differences between these two configurations will be one of the major bottlenecks. This should, of course, be much easier if you have a high coverage of tests, especially or contract tests for your application, which we always recommend it. But keep in mind that if you don't have them, dedicate some time to write some part of the safety net first before you will move to changes between one file to another. Another case that, and it's worth mentioning that the good part is that API Platform is not experimental anymore. Therefore, right now it should be much more stable and easier to maintain the configuration over the years between different versions of Sylius. Now, to sum up, yes, the migration will take you some effort and consume some of your budget, but it's a required step forward because otherwise you will be left over with the legacy system without any security fixes anymore. In addition, there are major developer experience improvements in Sylius 2.0 which should be worth the effort. Therefore, the recommendation path for your upgrade should be now, first, upgrade to Sylius 1.14 as it's the closest version to 2.0. From now on, we can tackle the major problems in the migration. Changes from Semantic UI to the Bootstrap, from the dead technology to the technology widely adopted. Removal of the jQuery, still beloved by some, but Vanilla.js is a new standard. Symfony UX should bring your backend developers to the speed with some front-end changes if needed, especially with the help of some AI tooling. Remember that you should skip going only to Sylius 2.0 and Sylius 2.1 and at least and preferably Sylius 2.2 should be your goal. To reduce your cost, you can still use Winzu State Machine for Sylius 2.0. You can use Legacy Shop Bridge Bundle to not move your optimized frontend for storefront. And also, don't be afraid that there is a new payment system in Sylius. Just in the summary, there's some additional layers that will provide in the future a new integration platform, but it's all backward compatibility with the Payum system. So your payment provider should still work as it is, also to reduce the scope and the surface of integration and reduce, therefore, the risk. Now, feel free to subscribe for more, as we plan to make a deep dive into components to AV platform, Symfony UX, business perspective and differences between two platforms, and more that should make your upgrade path easier. Also, together with my colleagues from Commerce Weavers, we are working on cloud-supported upgrade path that should also additionally reduce your time to market or time to delivery of the upgrade path. Also, contact us to get a free assessment of your upgrade path if needed. The link will be down below. And once again, subscribe for more videos from us. I hope that this video was helpful to you. See you next time or one of the conferences or on the Slack. Bye.